Story 1. The Phantom of the Aegean. The Mediterranean shimmered like a sheet of sapphire under the late April sun, its surface broken only by the sleek silhouette of the celebrity eclipse. For Shelby Moretti, a 36-year-old widow from Florence, Italy, this cruise was no mere vacation. It was a sacred act of closure. 8 years ago, on April 29, 2016, her husband Antonio was torn from her life in a motorcycle accident. His dreams of exploring Greece left unfulfilled. Their shared vision of wandering Santorini's whitewashed cliffs and marveling at Athens' ancient temples had been postponed by work, by life, until it was too late. Now alone, Shelby had booked the Best of Greece cruise, a 12-day odyssey covering 6 cities: Athens, Santorini, Ephesus, Mykonos, Volos, and Thessaloniki, to honor his memory. But as the ship sailed from Athens, a quiet sorrow clung to her, heavy as the sea mist. Shelby wasn't one for crowds, but the first night in Santorini found her at a bustling portside bar, the Siren's Call. The air was thick with the tang of ouzo and the murmur of multilingual chatter. She ordered a martini, then another, letting the alcohol blur the edges of her grief. By her 8th drink, the world was a warm, hazy swirl until she felt it. A gaze sharp and unyielding, cutting through the din. Across the bar sat a man, perhaps in his mid-40s, his long brown hair cascading past his shoulders, his beard wild and unkempt. His eyes were what unnerved her most. Not admiring, not curious, but predatory, as if he were studying her soul. Shelby tried to dismiss it as the paranoia of a grieving woman, but each time their eyes met, a chill settled deeper into her bones. She paid her tab, her movements unsteady, and hurried back to the ship, the man's face already fading into the fog of her intoxication. In Ephesus, the second stop, Shelby threw herself into the city's ancient wonders, trailing her fingers along weathered stones that had stood for millennia. The day passed without incident, her mind too occupied by history to dwell on Santorini's stranger. She drank heavily again, but the ruins and the Turkish sun kept her grounded. It was in Mykonos, under the island's iconic windmills, that the unease returned. Shelby sat at an outdoor cafe, sipping coffee and watching the sea sparkle, when she glanced across the street. There he was, the man from Santorini, leaning against a lamppost, arms crossed, his head tilted toward her. He wore the same faded black jacket and jeans, as if he'd stepped out of a photograph. Her pulse quickened. Was he following her? The distance obscured his expression, but the coincidence felt like a violation. She lowered her gaze, her hands trembling, and when she looked up, he was gone, leaving only the rustle of the wind. That night aboard the Eclipse, Shelby couldn't sleep. She paced the deck under a canopy of stars, the ship's hum a faint comfort against her growing paranoia. Was he a passenger? A crew member? She scoured the ship's lounges, dining halls, and casinos, her eyes darting to every shadow but found no trace. In Volos, her resolve hardened into obsession. She stationed herself at the gangway, watching every passenger disembark, her notebook filled with descriptions of faces and outfits. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher, but the man never appeared. Exhausted, she retreated to the ship's pool deck, trying to convince herself she was imagining things. Yet a nagging voice whispered that she wasn't. Thessaloniki, the final stop before Athens, was where the nightmare crescendoed. Shelby, wary of bars after Mykonos, spent the day wandering the city's Byzantine churches and bustling markets, the scent of jasmine and roasted chestnuts filling the air. She'd almost convinced herself to let go of her fear when she turned a corner and saw him. He stood in the middle of a narrow street, arms at his sides, his eyes locked on her with that same searing intensity. This time, something snapped. Fear gave way to fury and she shouted, "Who are you? Why are you following me?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he turned and ran, his footsteps echoing against the stone walls. Shelby gave chase, her heart pounding, weaving through alleys and dodging startled vendors. She rounded a corner, then another, but he was gone, vanished as if the city had swallowed him whole. Back on the ship, Shelby's relief at reaching Athens was tainted by dread. She returned to Florence, but the man's face haunted her dreams. Desperate for answers, she turned to her laptop, diving into Greek news archives and police databases. Hours bled into days with no leads until she stumbled upon a missing person site. There, in grainy black and white, was a face that stopped her heart. It was him, Antonio Rossi, a name that cut like a blade, echoing her late husband's. The report said he'd vanished 2 years ago near Parga, Greece, last seen on a fishing boat. Shelby's hands shook as she dialed the Greek police, her voice trembling as she recounted her sightings. The operator's tone was measured but hesitant. After a long pause, she delivered a bombshell. Antonio Rossi's case was closed. His body had been found a month ago, the victim of a boating accident off Parga's coast. The date of his death? April 29th, 2018, exactly 2 years after her husband's passing. Shelby's world fractured. Had she seen a ghost? A hallucination born of grief and gin? She pored over her memories, realizing the only city where she hadn't seen him was Ephesus, in Turkey, not Greece. Was there a spectral boundary, a line he couldn't cross? For a year, she avoided Greece, bearing the experience in therapy sessions and sleepless nights. But the past clawed its way back during her niece Maria's wedding in Athens the following summer. Amid the clinking glasses and joyous laughter, Shelby glimpsed him by the hotel bar, his black jacket unmistakable, his eyes fixed on her. The crowd swallowed him before she could react, leaving her trembling. She confided in Maria, who suggested she visit a local priest. The old man listened, his face grave, and spoke of restless spirits tied to unresolved pain. He blessed her, but his words offered little comfort. Back in Florence, Shelby's life became a fortress. She installed security cameras, changed her locks, and avoided crowds, haunted by the possibility that Antonio Rossi's spirit, or something darker, was still watching. Last month, a letter arrived, postmarked from Parga. Inside was a single photograph of Santorini's cliffs, with no note, no explanation. Shelby burned it, but the image lingers, a reminder that some ghosts never leave. Story 2: The Predator's Pursuit. The Carnival Sunrise was a floating Eden, its decks alive with the pulse of music and the clatter of cocktail glasses as it carved through the Atlantic toward the Bahamas. For Devin Harper, a 21-year-old senior at Rowan University, this cruise was a long overdue rebellion. She and her sorority sisters, Tayor, Messina, and Taylor, had survived a grueling semester of exams, hookups, and Greek life drama, and now, freshly 21, they were ready to conquer Paradise Island. Their plan was simple: drink until the world blurred, dance until dawn, and post every moment to Instagram. But beneath the surface, cracks festered. Devin and Taylor were oil and water, their rivalry fueled by years of subtle slights. Devin, with her gym-sculpted body and curated social media, believed Taylor envied her confidence. Taylor, sharp-tongued and unapologetic, seemed to relish pushing Devin's buttons, her smirks a silent challenge. The first day on Paradise Island was a kaleidoscope of sun, sand, and rum runners. At the Coral Reef, a beachside bar packed with sunburned tourists, the four friends held court, laughing and flirting with strangers who happily bought their drinks. Devin thrived in the spotlight, her confidence soaring with each cocktail. When Messina asked her to grab a drink, Devin strutted to the bar, ordering 2 piña coladas. As she waited, she pulled out her iPhone for a selfie with Messina, the drinks glowing against the turquoise sea. But when Tyre called Messina over, she darted off, leaving her drink behind. Not wanting it stolen, Devin grabbed it, setting her phone on the bar for a split second. She delivered the drinks, teasing Messina's scatterbrain, and the night dissolved into a haze of laughter and neon lights. It wasn't until the ship pulled away from the island that Devin's world tilted. Her phone was gone. Panic clawed at her as she tore through her bag, her stomach churning. She'd left it at the bar, a careless mistake that threatened to derail the trip. Tears welled as she imagined a vacation without selfies or Snapchat. Desperate, she opened her laptop to track her phone, expecting it to be lost on the island. To her shock, the blue dot pulsed somewhere on the sunrise. Relief surged. Someone must have turned it into the lost and found. But the crew had nothing, and her hopes soured into suspicion. Someone on this ship had her phone, and they weren't giving it back. The next day, Devin tried to salvage the trip, lounging by the pool and forcing smiles for Taylor's camera. But the absence of her phone gnawed at her, a constant reminder of her vulnerability. She checked its location obsessively, and during a moment on the ship's bow, with the sea stretching endlessly, she froze. The blue dot was nearly on top of her. She scanned the crowd, families, couples, crew members, but no one stood out. When she told her friends, Taylor and Messina were shocked, but Taylor's barely concealed smirk ignited Devon's fury. Was she behind this? The thought took root, and later in the ship's arcade, Devon checked again. The dot was still there, a digital shadow mirroring her every move. Convinced Taylor was mocking her, Devon confronted her, demanding she empty her purse. Taylor complied, her eyes blazing, but the phone wasn't there. The argument exploded, Devon's accusations cutting deep, and Taylor's retorts branding her an idiot. Devon stormed off, vowing to shun Taylor for the rest of the cruise. The days blurred, Devon isolating herself, her paranoia growing. She wandered the ship alone, checking her phone's location in crowded bars and quiet corridors. But the dot remained elusive, always nearby, yet out of reach. On the final night, as the sunrise neared New York, Devon returned to her cabin, drained. There on the floor was an envelope, slipped under the door. Her hands trembled as she opened it, revealing a handwritten letter. The words made her skin crawl. A man named Bart Vinsky claimed he'd found her unlocked phone, scrolled through her photos, and fallen in love with her. The letter was brief but invasive, detailing her cabin number and describing a selfie she'd taken in the arcade. Devon felt violated, her privacy stripped bare. She reported it to security, but they were powerless. The cruise was ending, and Bart Vinsky was a ghost. Back in South Jersey, Devon tried to rebuild, but the letter lingered like a bruise. That night, curled up watching reality TV, a sudden impulse struck. She checked her phone's location one last time. The screen loaded, and her blood ran cold. The blue dot was over her house. A scream ripped from her throat, waking her family. Her father, a former Marine, grabbed his hunting rifle and charged outside, Devon trailing behind. He fired a warning shot, his voice thundering through the suburban night. In the moonlight, they saw a figure leap over the side gate and sprint down the street. Devon's father hesitated, choosing not to pursue, but the backyard revealed a horror worse than any chase. A ladder was propped against the house, leading to Devon's bedroom window. The latch was nearly sawed through, inches from giving way. If she hadn't checked her phone's location, she might have been asleep when the window opened. The police filed a report, but weeks passed with no leads. Devon deactivated her phone, deleted her social media, and installed a security system, but the fear remained. She confided in Taylor, who suggested they dig deeper. Using a friend's access to a university database, they searched for Bart Vinsky. The name led to a dead end, a retired accountant in Ohio, nothing like the predator Devon described. But a reverse image search of a photo from the cruise, taken by Messina, revealed a chilling detail. In the background, barely noticeable, was a man in a gray hoodie, watching them from the bar's edge. Devon's heart sank. It was him, she was sure, though his face was obscured. Months later, a package arrived at Devon's dorm. Inside was her phone, its screen cracked but functional. A note read, "You're harder to find now." Impressive. Devon burned the note, sold the phone, and moved to a new apartment. But the violation lingered. She avoids cruises, checks her locks nightly, and wonders if Bart Vinsky, or whoever he is, will ever stop watching. Story 3. The Siren's Deceiver. For Clara Vega, the sea was a lover's promise, vast, unpredictable, and endlessly alluring. A 26-year-old bartender from Leon, Spain, she'd spent her childhood dreaming of cruise ships where the horizon stretched forever and every passenger carried a story. With her quick wit and flair for cocktails, she landed a job with Royal Caribbean, and by her third tour, she was a fixture on the oasis of the seas, pouring drinks for a kaleidoscope of travelers. The 12-day transatlantic cruise from Miami to Portugal and Spain was her longest yet, a marathon of 5 days at sea before docking in Ponta Delgada. Clara thrived in the chaos, her nights filled with laughter, flirtations, and the clink of glasses. But beneath the glamour, a darkness was waiting, one that would shatter her dreams and haunt her for years. Clara was no stranger to the bar's nightly dance. Drunk passengers, bold advances, and the occasional heartfelt confession. She handled them all with grace, her smile a shield, her quips a sword. But one passenger on this cruise stood out. He called himself Sebastian, a tall man in his mid-30s with light green eyes that seemed to hold a quiet sorrow. He appeared on the first night, claiming a stool at her bar and nursing a whiskey with deliberate slowness. Clara noticed him immediately, not for his looks, though he was handsome, but for the way he watched the crowd, detached yet calculating. Each night he returned, lingering until the bar emptied, his presence a constant in her whirlwind shifts. By the third night, curiosity got the better of Clara. She struck up a conversation, asking about his travels. Sebastian's voice was low, his words measured as he spoke of a fractured marriage. His wife, Sasha, had betrayed him with his college friend Charles, a betrayal that had gutted him. He shared their full names as if unburdening a secret he'd carried too long. Clara listened, her heart softening. She'd heard countless sob stories, but Sebastian's felt raw, his pain palpable. He'd booked the cruise alone, he said, hoping the sea's vastness would drown his grief. Clara found herself drawn to him, their late-night talks a refuge from the bar's chaos. She looked forward to his visits, his green eyes a beacon in her long shifts. The night before docking in Ponta Delgada, Sebastian's demeanor shifted. He thanked Clara for her kindness, his voice thick with emotion. "You've made this bearable," he said, sliding a generous tip across the bar. "Let me buy you a drink to say thanks." Clara hesitated. Accepting drinks was a gray area, a line she rarely crossed. But Sebastian's vulnerability disarmed her, and she agreed, inviting him behind the bar to mix the drink himself. It was a small gesture, she thought, a way to honor his gratitude. Sebastian's hands were steady as he poured, his sad smile unwavering. Clara sipped the cocktail, the vodka sharp and familiar. But within minutes, a fog descended. Her limbs grew heavy, her vision swam, and the bar tilted like a ship in a squall. She clutched the counter, but the world went black. Clara woke to terror. She was in her cabin, but it was a war zone. Drawers yanked open, clothes strewn across the floor, her suitcase gone. Her safe was pried open, its contents vanished. Worst of all, she was bound to her bed, a towel stuffed in her mouth, the fabric bitter against her tongue. Her clothes were intact, a small mercy, but the violation was visceral. She screamed into the gag, her cries muffled, until a room service worker found her an hour later. The ship was pulling out of Jamaica. Clara had been unconscious for nearly a day. Rage surged, drowning her fear. Sebastian had played her, his sob story a meticulously crafted lie. She reported the incident to security, but the footage confirmed her worst fears. Sebastian had disembarked in Ponta Delgada, vanishing before the ship sailed on. The crew urged silence, offering hush money to protect the cruise line's reputation. They promised to track him down. His passport was on file, his identity verifiable. But as weeks passed, the investigation crumbled. Sebastian's identity was real. Name, address, social security number. But he was a ghost. His apartment was empty, his phone disconnected, his employers clueless. The police in Portugal and the US chased leads, but every trail went cold. Clara took leave from Royal Caribbean, retreating to Lyon to rebuild. She threw herself into therapy, trying to reclaim her sense of safety. But the sea's call had turned sour. Then the envelopes began. The first arrived a month later, a blank envelope containing a photo of Clara leaving a grocery store, her face unaware. A week later, another showed her at a cafe, laughing with a friend. The photos kept coming, each one a silent taunt, a reminder that Sebastian was still out there. Clara's world shrank to her apartment, her days haunted by the fear of unseen eyes. She installed cameras, changed her locks, and avoided public places, but the envelopes persisted. After the 6th, she went to the police, her hands shaking as she handed over the photos. They opened a case but offered little hope. There were no fingerprints, no leads. One night, a sharp knock on her bedroom window shattered the silence. Clara froze, her heart pounding. She called the police, who found nothing. No footprints, no evidence. But the terror was unbearable. She moved to a new city, changed her number, and locked down her life, praying it would be enough. 3 months passed without an envelope, and Clara dared to hope. But last week, a package arrived at her new address, its origin untraceable. Inside was a single item, her stolen phone, its screen displaying a photo of her sleeping in her old apartment, taken from above her bed. A note read, "You can't hide forever." Clara burned the note, destroyed the phone, and hired a private investigator. But the fear remains. She'll never work on a cruise again, and the sea, once her lover, is now her enemy.